So tonight we have Richard W. Wise. He is a book author and GG, and tonight he will be talking about Secrets of the Gem Trade, the Connoisseur's Guide to Precious Gemstones, second edition, which he updated from the original. The original book appeared, I believe, in, oh my gosh, 2001.
2001.
Yeah, and the second edition was in 2016, and he's also, it's been extensively revised and rewritten with lots of new pictures, new chapters, all sorts of new stuff. So let's welcome Richard tonight so that he can get going here, and I will stop talking. So thank you, Richard, for being our speaker tonight. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome.
If anyone has a question, please put it in the chat box and we will read the questions afterwards. And we will also go to a live question and answer when Richard is finished. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Melanie, and thanks to the Washington GIA for inviting me. This is my third visit, and I have to say that I think that your organization must be one of the busiest, certainly one of the most active ones in the United States. Well, as someone mentioned earlier, the first edition of Secrets of the Gem Trade was published in 2001. That was a very different time. You know, when I started in the business in 1978, there was nothing at all in the literature that would give you a leg up on trying to figure out and judge quality in gemstones, much less connoisseurship. I remember my first trip to Tucson, and I was sitting in a room at the old Holiday Inn Broadway, and the room was occupied by a New York dealer, an old line New York dealer, and he sold rubies and sapphires. And this was probably the first time I'd ever sat down with a parcel of rubies. And I had, you know, I was picking through them and looking at them and putting them out on the little pad and so forth. And I said, I'm just, you know, I'm really studying these rubies. So the dealer says, so what do you think? And I said, well, you know, I have a question for you. And he said, okay. And I said, well, this one is $3,000. This one is $2,000, and this one's $1,500. I said, well, why? What is the criteria to determine the difference in price? And he looks at me and he, for a minute, scratches his head and says, which one do you like? And I said, well, I like this one. He said, well, so buy it. That was the answer to my question. So buy it. Nobody would tell you much of anything about quality grading. You could ask the questions, but you'd always get some sort of silly answer or some answer that made no sense to you. Particularly with me, I had a background in philosophy and logic. And so I asked questions which I thought made sense, but I get answers that didn't. I thought at the time that the reason for that was that they didn't want to reveal the secrets of quality grading. And as I found out later, that was partly true. But it was also true that even if they had wanted, or he had wanted, to give me a little lecture on qualities in rubies, he wouldn't have been able to do it because he didn't have the vocabulary to express it. Think about that. He didn't really, because there was no universally accepted vocabulary to discuss quality in gemstones at the time. In fact, the vocabulary we have today has been borrowed mainly from color science, but at least we have one. Well, so today things are very much different. There must be a color grading system behind every bush. There's a new one coming out every couple of months. You see this company's come out with a grading system, this lab's come out with a grading system, and so forth. And they're all based on what is called the 4 C's. Well, I have a problem with that. The 4 C's is wholly inadequate as a basis for discussion of quality in any gemstone. The 4 C's were invented by a public relations company by the name of N.W. Ayer back in the 1940s. And the reason they invented them was because it was sort of a sales tool, a way in which you could explain to the totally ignorant why they should pay $1,000 for this little bitty diamond that was maybe the size of a pea. That was going to cost them $1,000 or $1,500 or today $20,000. But it was simplified and it was simplistic, and it really didn't cover the bases. So what I decided to do was I decided that I was going to learn all of the secrets, all of the nuances, all of the criterion for grading gemstones. And then I was going to write a book and tell everybody. Hence, Secrets of the Gem Trade, 2001. Now, since that time, what's happened? In the second edition, which was published in 2016, took me about 4 years to write. Well, it took me 4 years to write, but I started studying to write it right after I published the first volume, or while I was publishing the first volume, because I had left out a great number of stones. I left out the stones that I didn't understand well enough to talk about. So in the second edition, I added 11 new chapters, 127 additional pages, which included 11 new chapters covering jade, demantoid garnet, natural pearls, conch pearls, sunstone, moonstone, peridot, cobalt blue spinel. I did do red spinel in the first volume, but I revised it in the second. Golconda or type 2A diamonds, plus a bunch of new introductory essays on blue white diamonds, jadeite, natural pearls, spinel, feldspars, and I added 171 photographs. All done by all courtesy of some of the major gem photographers in the world. Because, you know, if you're going to talk about stones, you want to be able to show a photograph, at least, of a paradigm, of an exceptional stone, so that you have a visual basis for the discussion. Now, let's see here. How do I get to my next slide? I thought I just hit a button. Well, okay. So what did I do? I went on the road again. I visited East Africa, Thailand, Brazil, Ida Oberstein, Tucson, and let's see, one other place that I went in Brazil between the early 1980s when I started this odyssey, and 2001 when I published the book. But it was necessary to visit some new sources. You know, if you really want to understand a gemstone, if you really want to understand quality, you've got to go to the source, because you've got to see the variety of qualities that are available. And there's no better place to see those things than at in-source locations around the world. So I started to visit new sources. Here's two photographs. Both of these, one of these is taken in Yangon, the one on the right, and the one on the left is taken in the Mogok Valley. You know, when a miner in Mogok is hurt, they don't have any such thing in Burma as Social Security, but they have what's called the kinseis. The kinseis are the sons and daughters and widows of the miners who have been either hurt or killed. And they're given the exclusive right to work the tailings of the mines. You know, by tailings, I mean the stream that comes out of an alluvial mine is often carries small gemstones. And as you can see, these kids have recovered some of those stones, and they're very anxious to try to sell them to me. So here I am at the bottom of an emerald mine. And here are the two photographs I was talking about. The one on the right was taken in Yangon, the major market for Burmese rubies is in Yangon. Well, the major market actually may be Bangkok, but the source market is Yangon. And here I am at the central market, just sort of being handed rubies and looking at them. My first big trip, or my second big trip, was to Bogota. I had written a chapter on emeralds in the first book, but since my major experience had been with Brazilian emeralds, I thought it was important to go to Colombia to see the finest of the fine. I mean, you can certainly find exceptional emerald in Brazil. You can even find emeralds that, to a degree, can stand toe-to-toe with Colombian stones. I'm speaking now of the emeralds from Goiás. But if you're going to be honest, you've got to admit that the best stuff, the best of the best, is going to be found in Colombia. So here I am. Here are a couple of photographs I took in Bogota. And there on the left, you see, what is it? It's the famous mountain called something Fura. And it's visible on the way from Bogota to the gem mines in Boyaca. Bogota itself is 6,000 feet up above sea level, so it's always fairly cool there. You know, in the upper 60s, early 70s, and it is the major market. And as you can see, it's a very modern city. But I had a particularly great opportunity. What you see on the left is the same, is an emerald crystal. What you see on the right is another crystal from that same parcel. And you see that the crystal itself, it was extraordinarily well formed. It's a wonderful, almost perfect, it is a perfect hexagon. On the bottom is where it's been broken off from the host rock. But it's a perfect hexagon, and I had an opportunity to buy it. The dealer, the cutter that I went to subsequent to making the purchase said, "Oh, you know, you could cut 1.5 carats and a 2 carat out of that." And I said, "Yeah, I could, but I really love that crystal, so I never cut it." And here's the parcel it came from. Now this is, you know, when do you get a chance to see an emerald parcel like this? This is $1 million parcel. And as you can see, almost every one of the stones is the rough crystals is a perfect hexagon, broken off at the bottom. Just for kicks, the big one in the lower left, I was offered that one. That would have been $50,000. So I passed on that one, and I bought a slightly slimmer one that I was able to get at a significantly lower price than that. But just to be able to see this kind of quality was extraordinary. And as I say, when do you ever get to sit next to a parcel of emerald that looks like that? From there, we went to the cutting shop. And we did, and I observed some of the cutting going on in Bogota. They do some really good work there. You know, a lot of emeralds you see are quite windowed. But that is a decision made by the owner of the rough. They're perfectly able to cut perfectly symmetrical, perfectly brilliant gemstones. And here in this series of photographs, you see the cutter, a young lady by the name of Argati, examining the rough. Here you see on the middle, you see it on the dop stick. And on the right, you see a close-up of the stone as it looks. And that's one of the stones cut directly from that parcel I showed you in the previous slide. So from there, we got on a motorcycle, myself and my guide, and we drove 5 hours outside of Bogota and dropped 5,000 feet to the steamy jungles of Boyaca. And here you see miners at the Lapita complex in Boyaca. You know, there's several emerald mines. The two most famous, of course, are Muzo and El Chivor. And those date back to the 16th century. But Lapita was discovered in the early 90s, and it resulted in an emerald rush. It also resulted in the drug lords from down south trying to come up and take over the mines. Unfortunately, they didn't realize what they were up against. So after a lot of blood was shed, they put their tails between their legs and they went back down, got out of town because the miners just beat the hell out of them. But here you see the garimpeiros. They're called garimpeiros in Brazil. I think they're called guaqueiros in Colombia. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese, and here they speak Spanish. And these are all independent miners. These folks are, as you see in the right-hand side, they work in the stream. And this is a big stream coming out of the mine, or coming off the mountain, I should say. So they're essentially panning for emerald. And you can see the black schist, which is the emeralds generally occur in this black schist. So 1/8 of a mile in and 300 feet down, we get to the bottom of the Connoisseur mine. And I got a chance to see, this was the first time I was in a major gem mine. You know, most gem mining is done by artisanal miners. That means somebody with a basket sitting in a stream or digging a hole with his brother and scooping out the dirt and hoping to find something. Because most gem deposits themselves are small. So it's never been financially feasible for large companies to come to take control of the gem fields in most cases. However, the mines in Colombia, the deposits are fairly large and fairly rich. And so you have large scale mining. We had to climb down well, there you see it. And right in the middle is you can see the ladder we had to climb down. And I did this all for you folks. So I hope you appreciate it.
I did this all for you folks.
I did it for you. So
Thank you.
here we are. On the left is a picture of the little town outside of the Lapita complex. And here I am at the bottom of the shaft looking at a bit of emerald. It occurred to me when I got down there, I thought to myself, you know, am I claustrophobic at all? And I thought, well, I better not think about that right now, because the passageway was about 3.5 feet wide and about 5.5 feet tall. You can see I'm 6'2", so I was quite a bit taller than the roof of the shaft. But the miners work in there, and they work in shifts. And at the end of the shift, one miner gets a chance to keep one of the small crystals, usually a crystal that's going to cut a fairly small stone, maybe something in a sub-carat or something in the 1/2, 3/4 carat range. And here they are, and here I am in the same shaft. And I'm sure the miners are having a hell of a good laugh at my expense. I mean, what's this gringo doing down here with a camera taking pictures of us? But I did, and you'll see some of those photographs and secrets of the gem trade. As I say, this is about, we walked in right straight in through a stream for about 1/8 of a mile. And the water was up to our thighs. And then we got to a point where we could go down, and we went down, I would say about 300, 400 feet. I really didn't measure it off. So anyway, after that, we went to the Sunday miners market. We stayed over an extra night so we could go to this market. This is where the miners, who get each one, as I said, told you at the end of the shift, one of the miners gets a chance to keep a small crystal that they've mined. And then what they do is they take the crystals to the Sunday market and they sell them. And you can see in the bottom picture, this is one young lady, and she's got a little crystal that probably weighs about 3/4 of a carat, but it's nicely formed. It's probably a medium color, sort of a light medium green. In fact, I think I bought it, and I think I cut a 40 pointer out of it, emerald cut. It's one of the reasons why most emeralds are emerald cut is because the shape of the crystal dictates the best way to cut it and the most savings from the rough. And also it gives the emerald that sort of satiny texture that's so desired by connoisseurs. But so there's two real reasons to do it. One is to save weight, and the other one is to give you a sort of satiny brilliance. Well, from there, I went to Mexico. Now, this is over a series of about 6 years. So, I didn't do this all in one go. But I thought I took a picture of this fellow. This is an opal mine in Guanajuato, Mexico. And I thought this guy looked like the quintessential Mexican, with the long mustache and the sort of cowboy hat. So he let me take his picture. On the way there, Guanajuato, you may have heard of San Miguel de Allende, which is also up about 5,000 feet in the mountains and is a very famous tourist attraction. Has some wonderful, as you can see here, some wonderful, I don't know what the style of architecture is called, but it really looks like you'd expect a Mexican town to look. And I enjoyed it. I spent 3 months here doing the last pages of the book. And it was a wonderful place to spend the time. My wife came down for 2 weeks and left. So I had like 3 months of solitude in which to enjoy good Mexican food and learn a little Spanish and write the book. And in the next slide, you see one of the celebrations. I think that had to, I don't know, I'm not Catholic, but as you know, the Mexicans are into death. And I think this may be a saint or a rubberized version of a saint, or perhaps plaster, in a tomb, in a casket, being carried through the streets of San Miguel de Allende. And here's a beautiful street scene of the main cathedral again in San Miguel. So, okay, this is the La Trinidad opal mine. As you know, most Mexican opal has an orange body color, orange to red. It can be quite lively. It's most of it is a form of boulder opal, so it occurs in matrix. And here you have the mining that goes on. Now, this is hard rock mining. This isn't alluvial mining. And the gentleman to your left, who I call Jose Dynamite, he's just putting together a couple sticks of dynamite in preparation for blowing a hole in the cliffside. To get some more of this material you see on the right, in which you will find the opals. The opals are actually unlike the opals from Australia, which are basically alluvial, except of course for the boulder opal. all of this stuff occurs in this hard matrix. I apologize, I can't tell you what the matrix is, but you can see that it's pretty hard. And here he is, or here is two of his compadres blowing a hole in the cliff to get at some of the rough material. And then they just go at it with pickaxes in the hope that they're going to find some good rough opal that they can cut into gems and sell. Okay, one of the things that happened in the early 90s was the discovery of two different types of spinel. The first at Mahenge in Tanzania was a red-pink spinel. And this material, almost all of which came from two giant crystals that were recovered at Mahenge, the village. And unlike the usual run of spinel, you know, we were all used to this sort of graphically gray blue stuff, and some occasionally you would see some very pale pink material that characterized spinel up until this point. Well, the Mahenge material was vivid pink to vivid red. It almost always had a secondary orange cast, but sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it could be pure pink. The red usually had a little bit of orange in them, but occasionally they could be an incredibly pure red. The other type of spinel was the cobalt blue. And if you've ever seen a fine cobalt blue, I often say that sapphire wishes it could look so good. First stop was Hanoi. Kind of interesting to see after, you know, I was in the service during the Vietnam War. And of course, at that time, Hanoi was a place where we were bombing like crazy. And as you can see, it's recovered quite well. And there's a scattering of large skyscrapers along with the smaller 1, 2, and 3-story buildings that still dominate the skyline. The spinel, both the cobalt blue and some pinks, purples, and violets, are found around the village of Loc Yen, which is about 800 miles north of Hanoi. And here you see two photographs of Loc Yen village. The lady on the left, that's my grandmother. And to the right, you see all of these red flags. These are all Vietnamese flags. And as you drive around, you also see that they have some big billboards. And they have the typical communist slogans, you know, hard work builds strength and those kinds of things all over the place. But they're very definitely a communist country. And you can sort of see that by all the flags that are showing up here in the village. And this is, you know, this is really pretty far out there in the hinterlands. And we went there to visit the Spinel and the ruby mines. They do have ruby mines, although the ruby they produce isn't spectacular. But they do produce occasionally a cobalt blue spinel. And I will tell you that a cobalt blue spinel is extraordinarily rare. It's almost unobtainable over 1 carat. And I've only seen 3 or 4 carat size stones that I would consider to be the finest of the fine. And there's a photograph of one of them in the book. But anyway, here's the market. So if you ever wondered what it's like to go to a market in Southeast Asia to buy gemstones, this is what it looks like. And these folks were selling all kinds of stuff. Not only things that were mined here, but also a lot of stuff that wasn't. I mean, if you can look on the left, they've got some, well, they said they were turquoise. They looked an awful lot like glass to me, beads. And, you know, there's food, and you can see in the foreground of the picture on your right, you can see some spinel rough being sorted. Or it could be ruby, but I'm pretty sure it's spinel. And all along the line there, people are looking at trays of both cut and rough stone. And there's this chubby gringo trying to beat them out of their best stuff. And I think that lady on the right beat me out of it. I think I paid twice as much. I bought a ruby specimen from her. And then later I bought another one for about half the price that was just as good. So I think the reason she's smiling is that she got the better of that particular deal. But you can see on the left-hand side, you can see, you know, there's some rough in the foreground there. That's probably a rough star ruby. They produce quite a bit of star ruby. It's quite opaque, but has wonderful, solid-looking stars. And then a lot of spinel crystal. There it is. That's what it looks like. Spinel, as you know, is singly refractive, and it crystallizes in the cubic system. And you can find beautiful, though, as you can see, quite small, perfectly formed crystals, some of which, like the one almost smack in the middle there, has not been treated, has not been polished. It came out of the ground that way. I might tell you that in Moguk, you can also find similar crystals. They look almost the same. But if you look to the left, you'll notice that the material, when it's all together, this, at least in this parcel, there's a certain tinge to the material. I call this slightly light brownish or maybe a little orangey tinge. And it's very small. I mean, these are going to cut melly size stones. Whereas the ones to the right, there are a few there that I think would cut into some fairly red quarter caraters. And then there's a lot of opaque material that you would cab. The mines are everywhere, you know, around Loc-Yen, all around outside the town. And there's a lot of artisanal mining, which means that this particular mine was a fellow and his sister worked, and they dug a hole and they diverted a stream, and they got the rough material, not the rough material, but the gem bearing gravel, and they just wash it. You know, they wash it in a basket, or they use sieves or something like that, which is probably certainly one of the oldest forms of mining, alluvial material. And they dress pretty traditionally. And here you see it again. This is was supposedly a ruby mine. I did see some ruby. Most of what I saw was cabochon grade material. It was quite opaque, but nice color. To your left, this is where the workers hang out. This is where they have lunch and so forth. That's the rec room, I guess you could say. But you get a sense of what it looks like. And then to your right, there's a young man. He's washing the gem grade material that was dug out. He's washing away the big stuff in preparation for sieving the smaller stuff, which you see being done here in this triptych. This young lady is doing it the traditional way. I mean, you'll see baskets like that in Thailand and Burma. The gravel is a similar color. This is a little bit on the yellowish side, but that may be a trick of the photograph. In the back, you see a sort of red-brown material, mostly lateritic clay, which you find in almost all gem-bearing areas in Southeast Asia, and oddly enough, in the opal fields of Queensland, and also in the opal fields in Brazil. you know, it's similar material. So the next problem that I had was I decided I'd been going to the Hong Kong gem show. I'd been going to the Hong Kong gem markets. And I decided that I wanted to write a chapter on jade. Now, as you know, there's not a lot in the English language on quality grading in jade. I mean, it's almost, it seems that anybody who talks about jade says, well, you know, the Chinese have a handle on this. And even when you do see an attempt to grade the material, it's often the English translation of the Chinese terminology and criteria that are used to grade the material. I thought that didn't necessarily make sense. Here we are at the Hong Kong Gem Show. No, I'm sorry. Here we are at the Kowloon Gem Market. Just shows you two dealers, you know. And if you've ever been on a gem buying trip, what you're seeing is the only thing changes is the look of the faces. They may be Asian, they may be African, they may be American, they may be European, but basically they're doing the same thing. And here they are examining a couple of slabs of jadeite, most of which comes from Upper Burma, as you're probably aware. There are two kinds of jade, but the kind that is gem material is jadeite. Nephrite or Chinese jade is a material that's valued chiefly for the aesthetics of its carving, whereas jadeite, I'd say, is a true gem in that it's graded by how it looks. So from there, I was at the Hong Kong Gem Show, and Richard Hughes invited me to go along with him to the Guangzhou jade market in China. That was about a 3-hour train trip. It wasn't that far from Hong Kong. So my wife and I said, sure, we'll go.
Recording in progress.
And here we are at the jade market in Guangzhou. Look at those bangles on the left. Beautiful, aren't they? Look at the beautiful color in them. They're highly transparent. They're fake. They're chalcedony that's been dyed. If those were real, there might be one in her hand, because those colors, even those colors together at that transparency, would be very fine bangle material. They don't use the best jade for bangles. They make cabochons out of them, generally speaking, because they're normally not that big. But if those bangles would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars if they were truly untreated jadeite. And to the right, you see the opening of the front of the market. And here you see four photographs together. To the left, that's what's known as ice jade. It's in a traditional pie shape. Note it does look like ice. It's valued chiefly for the level of its translucency. Jade is never completely transparent. But what's interesting about how jade is graded, if you've read my book, you know that I say that the 4 C's of connoisseurship are color, clarity, and crystal. And by crystal, I simply mean color, cut, clarity, and crystal. By crystal, I simply mean transparency. The level of transparency in a gemstone is an absolute grading criterion but it's one that's rarely recognized even in these modern grading systems. But it has ancient roots, and it's been written about in most of the literature going back as far as the 4th century BC in India. Al-Biruni talked about it. Al-Tafachi talked about it. Shipley talked about it. But it sort of slipped into the background. And most of the people who reviewed Secrets of the Gem Trade say, oh, no, crystal, no, that's just a subset of clarity. Well, think about it. How do you define clarity? Is defined by inclusions, isn't it? If a stone, a diamond, has no visible inclusions under 10 power of magnification, then it's flawless. But what about its level of transparency? That's a completely different question. It's a completely different quality. And since quality is what we're talking about, transparency or crystal is an absolutely essential grading criteria. And what I discovered when I started to review the literature and write this chapter, that the Chinese had always listed transparency as an overt grading criteria. In the first book I read by a fellow by the name of Nig, and G is his last name, John Nig. It's called Jade for You. He lists the grading criteria as the 3 T's and the 2 C's. And the 3 T's are transparency, texture, and what's the third one? I just forgot it. And the 2 C's are color and clarity. In a 1995 Christie's, or was it a Sotheby's catalog for a jade auction in Hong Kong, there's an essay, an anonymous essay on the grading of gems, on the grading of jade. Says the same thing, that transparency or crystal is an overt grading criteria. So that led me to the conclusion that why do we need to try to come up with another series of criteria under different names to grade a gemstone if the gemstone is graded for beauty? If it's graded for beauty, we can apply the same criteria as I apply to every other gemstone in the book, namely color, cut, clarity, and crystal. Forget about carat weight. That's not a quality criterion. I mean, unless you say the bigger it is, the prettier it is. It's not really a grading criterion. And so what I found was, with the addition of texture, because jade is an aggregate, a crystalline aggregate, it's not a monocrystalline gemstone like most faceted gemstones are. It's a crystalline aggregate, so it has texture by definition. If you add texture to color, cut, clarity, and crystal, you can grade jade, and you can use them, and you can use Western terminology. And here's some great pictures of some exceptional pieces of jade, but let me show you something here. So there we are, the 4 C's of connoisseurship, and the 4 C's with the addition of texture that allows you to grade jadeite jade. This is the Midvani necklace. This sold for more money. I think it was $42 million or something. It's a necklace. I think it's 18 inches. Here's a close-up of 3 of the beads in the necklace that I took. What do we see there? We see a rich medium to medium dark green that is semi-translucent, highly saturated, and beautiful. Same thing with this the lavender jade on your right. The criteria for grading these two stones is identical to the criteria that you would use to grade any other gemstone. I mean, if you took an emerald and cut it into a cabochon or a bead, it would look similar. And so it can be graded by using similar criteria. But without transparency, it's impossible as a grading criterion, it's impossible to separate the best from the also rans. In any gemstone material you can think of, tell me a gem variety where the more opaque the stone is, the better it is. If you can do that, I will admit to you that I am wrong. Thank you very much.